The ancient warning Captain Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the cool metal of the observation deck's viewport, watching the dead world slowly rotate beneath them. Kepler 442c had once been home to an advanced civilization, but now only ruins and dust remained. The planet's surface was scarred with massive craters and crystalline formations that defied explanation. "Captain, we've located the source of the signal," reported Lieutenant Commander David Park from the bridge. "It's coming from what appears to be a massive underground complex, approximately 2 kilometers beneath the main city ruins." Sarah turned away from the window, her reflection briefly visible in the reinforced glass. At 35, she had already commanded 3 deep space exploration missions, but this was humanity's first journey beyond the local star cluster. The UES Discovery had been traveling for 8 months to reach this system, following mysterious transmissions that had been detected by Earth's long-range sensor arrays. "Assemble the landing team," Sarah ordered, walking toward the bridge. "I want Dr. Webb, the full archaeology team, and a security detail ready in 20 minutes. Dr. Marcus Webb was already suiting up in the shuttle bay when Sarah arrived. They, Xenorchaeologist, had spent the entire journey studying the transmitted signals, trying to decode their meaning. His excitement was barely contained as he checked his equipment for the 3rd time. "Captain, these transmissions aren't random," Webb said, his voice muffled by his helmet's communication system. "There's a pattern, almost like they're specifically designed to be understood by a species at our exact level of technological development. It's as if someone wanted us to find this place." The shuttle descent took 40 minutes, navigating through the planet's thin atmosphere and the debris field that surrounded the major population centers. The surface was eerily quiet, with no signs of life despite the planet's atmosphere being perfectly breathable. Ancient spires reached toward the sky like skeletal fingers, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Sarah's team set up a base camp near the entrance to the underground complex. The opening was massive, easily large enough for their shuttle to fly through, and lined with the same crystalline formations they had observed from orbit. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls as they descended into the depths. "The architecture is incredible," Webb whispered, running his hands along the smooth walls. "These passages were built to last millennia. The engineering required to create something like this exceeds anything we've achieved on Earth." The team traveled deeper into the complex, following the source of the transmissions. The passages opened into vast chambers filled with towering machines that hummed with dormant energy. Strange displays covered the walls, showing symbols and images that seemed to tell a story. "Captain," called out Specialist Elena Rodriguez from the communications array, "I'm picking up a new signal. It's much stronger down here, and it's directed specifically at our equipment. Something is trying to communicate with us." As if responding to her words, the chamber suddenly filled with soft blue light. The wall displays activated, showing a series of images that began to move like an ancient film projection. The story they told was impossible to ignore. The images showed a species of tall, graceful beings with elongated limbs and large eyes that seemed filled with wisdom. They moved through cities of impossible beauty, their technology seamlessly integrated with nature. These were the Veilter, the former inhabitants of this world. Dr. Webb worked frantically to record everything, his equipment capturing every detail of the alien archive. "Captain, this is extraordinary. They're showing us their history, their culture, their scientific achievements. But there's something else here, something that feels like a warning." The images changed, showing the Veiltar gathered in great councils, their expressions filled with concern. They were looking at displays that showed distant stars, tracking something through space and time. Mathematical equations filled the screens, calculations that seemed to predict future events with frightening accuracy. They were scientists, Webb said, his voice full of awe. But not just any scientists. They were temporal mathematicians, capable of calculating probable futures based on current events. They could see how civilizations would develop, how species would evolve, how conflicts would unfold across the galaxy. The archive continued, showing the Veilters' growing alarm as their calculations revealed something that terrified them. The images showed a small blue world in a distant star system, and the primitive species that inhabited it. The humans looked exactly as they had thousands of years ago, but the Veilter-S equations showed what they would become. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she watched the projections. The archive showed humanity's future expansion into space, their tendency to turn every challenge into an opportunity for growth. It showed them facing impossible odds and somehow emerging stronger, adapting to threats that would destroy other species. "My God," Webb whispered. They weren't afraid of what humanity would do to them. They died out naturally, long before we achieved spaceflight. They were trying to warn everyone else about what we would become. The archive showed more images of humanity's predicted future. They saw humans colonizing hostile worlds, surviving in environments that would kill other species. They saw humanity facing extinction-level threats and somehow turning them into advantages. The Veilter had calculated that humanity would become an unstoppable force in the galaxy, not through conquest or destruction, but through their unique ability to adapt and overcome. "Look at this," Rodriguez called out, pointing to a section of the wall that had just activated. "There are star charts here, showing the locations of other alien civilizations." The Veilter weren't just studying humanity, they were tracking every species in the galaxy. The new displays showed dozens of alien species, each with their own predicted futures. Most showed gradual expansion, careful colonization, and eventual stagnation. But humanity's projection was different. It showed explosive growth, rapid adaptation, and the ability to solve problems that other species couldn't even comprehend. Dr. Webb continued documenting the archive, his excitement growing with each new discovery. "Captain, they've left detailed warnings about humanity for other species to find. They're describing us as the adaptive ones, the species that thrives on challenge and grows stronger through adversity." The archive showed one final series of images that made the entire team stop and stare. It depicted a great threat coming to the galaxy, something that would challenge every living species. The Veilter-S calculations showed most civilizations falling to this threat, their colonies abandoned, their species driven to extinction. But humanity's projection showed something different. It showed them not just surviving the threat, but finding a way to turn it into an opportunity for even greater expansion. "They knew," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with wonder. "Somehow, they knew that humanity would be the species that saves the galaxy, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through sheer determination and the refusal to accept defeat." The archive began to fade, its message delivered. But before the lights dimmed completely, one final image appeared. It showed the Veilter themselves, standing in the very chamber where the human team now stood. They were holding up their hands in what could only be described as a salute, acknowledging the species that would one day fulfill their predictions. Webb looked up from his equipment, his face pale with the magnitude of what they had discovered. "Captain, there's something else. The archive contains coordinates to other sites, like this one, scattered throughout the galaxy. The Veilter didn't just leave one warning, they left dozens. They wanted to make sure that when humanity finally reached the stars, other species would understand what they were dealing with." Sarah looked around the ancient chamber, feeling the weight of the Veilter's message. Humanity had always seen themselves as explorers and pioneers, but they had never imagined that their very nature would be seen as both a hope and a warning to the galaxy. "Prep the shuttle," she ordered. "We're taking everything back to the ship. Earth needs to know about this, and we need to start planning for what's coming." As the team gathered their equipment and prepared to leave, the chamber's lights dimmed to their original soft glow. The ancient warning had been delivered, and now it was up to humanity to prove that the Veiltar's faith in their unstoppable nature was justified. The journey back to the surface took on a different feeling. The team moved in contemplative silence, each member processing the implications of what they had discovered. Humanity was no longer just another species exploring the galaxy. They were the species that an ancient civilization had identified as the key to the galaxy's survival. Sarah stood once more at the observation deck's viewport as the Discovery prepared to leave. Kepler 442c, the dead world slowly receded, but its message would travel with them back to Earth. The Veiltar had tried to warn the galaxy about humanity's unstoppable rise, but they had also revealed humanity's ultimate destiny. The stars ahead seemed different now, filled with possibility and purpose. Somewhere out there, other species were reading the Veiltar's warnings, trying to prepare for humanity's inevitable expansion. But as the ancient archive had shown, preparation might not be enough. When humans set their minds to something, they didn't just succeed, they exceeded every expectation and transformed the impossible into the inevitable. The Discovery turned toward home, carrying with it the knowledge that would change humanity's understanding of their place in the cosmos. They were not just explorers or pioneers. They were the unstoppable force that an extinct civilization had seen coming across the vast expanse of time and space, and they were about to prove that every prediction had been absolutely correct. Asterisk, the unstoppable rise. 50 years had passed since Captain Sarah Chan's discovery of the Veiltar archive, and the galaxy had learned exactly what the ancient warnings meant. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood in the command center of humanity's newest deep space station, watching as evacuation fleets from 17 different species fled past human territory. They were all running from the same thing that had consumed 3 entire star systems in the past 6 months: the Void Plague. "Admiral, we're receiving another distress call from the Zephyrian fleet," reported Commander James Park, his voice tight with frustration. "They're requesting permission to pass through our space. That's the 5th species today asking for safe passage." Rebecca nodded grimly. The Void Plague wasn't a disease in any traditional sense. It was something far worse, a self-replicating phenomenon that consumed organic matter at the molecular level, leaving behind empty husks of what had once been thriving worlds. Every species in the galaxy was fleeing from it except one. "Grant them safe passage as always," Rebecca said, "and send them our standard message. Humanity is not evacuating, and our colonies remain open to any refugees who need assistance." The irony wasn't lost on her. 50 years ago, the galaxy had discovered the Veiltar warnings about humanity's unstoppable expansion. Many species had tried to limit human colonization, impose restrictions, or create buffer zones. Now those same species were fleeing through human space, begging for protection from a threat that defied all conventional solutions. Dr. Elena Vasquez burst into the command center, her lab coat still stained with samples from her latest experiments. At 42, she was humanity's leading expert on exotic biology and had been working around the clock since the Void Plague first appeared. "Admiral, I need to speak with you immediately," Elena said, her eyes bright with the intensity that Rebecca had learned to associate with breakthrough discoveries. "We figured out what the Void Plague actually is, and why every other species is running from it." Rebecca gestured toward her private office, and Elena followed, clutching a data tablet filled with research findings. The office walls were lined with star charts showing the current positions of human colonies, each one marked with green indicators showing they remained fully operational despite being closer to the plague than most evacuated systems. The Void Plague isn't random, Elena began, her words coming quickly. It's actually a terraforming mechanism, but one that's been corrupted or damaged. Someone or something designed it to break down existing ecosystems and rebuild them, but the rebuilding protocols have been severed. It's stuck in the destruction phase. Rebecca leaned forward, studying the data on Elena's tablet. You're saying this thing was supposed to create life, not destroy it? Exactly. And here's the critical part. It's designed to respond to biological stress responses. Every species we've encountered so far has the same reaction to mortal threats. They produce fear hormones, stress chemicals, fight or flight responses. The void plague feeds on those chemicals and becomes more aggressive when it detects them. The implications hit Rebecca immediately. But humans respond differently. Elena smiled, the expression fierce with pride. We don't just produce stress chemicals when threatened. We produce adrenaline, endorphins, and neurotransmitters associated with problem-solving and determination. When humans face extinction-level threats, we literally become more creative and resourceful. The void plague doesn't know how to process that response. A communication alert sounded, and Commander Park's voice came through the intercom. Admiral, you need to see this. We're receiving a transmission from Kethmer of the Galactic Collective. It's marked as urgent. Rebecca and Elena returned to the command center, where the main display showed the image of Kethmer, a being whose species resembled a cross between a crab and a tree. The Galactic Collective represented 47 different species, and Kethmer served as their current spokesperson for human relations. Admiral Torres, Kethmer began, his translator giving his words a formal, desperate tone. The collective has reached a unanimous decision. We are prepared to offer humanity complete autonomy over 12 star systems and unlimited resource rights in exchange for your assistance with the Void Plague crisis. Rebecca exchanged glances with her senior staff. 6 months ago, the collective had been trying to limit human expansion to 3 systems. What kind of assistance are you requesting, Kethmer? We need you to do what you always do, Kethmer replied, and there was something in his translated voice that sounded almost like admiration. We need you to find the impossible solution that no one else can see. Every species in the galaxy has tried to fight this plague using conventional methods. Evacuation, containment, defensive measures. All have failed. The Veilter archives spoke of humanity's ability to turn threats into opportunities. We need you to prove those predictions correct. After the transmission ended, Rebecca called an emergency meeting of her senior staff. The situation was unprecedented, but it was exactly the kind of challenge that humanity had always excelled at facing. Elena, what do you need to develop a solution? Rebecca asked. Access to an active plague site and permission to conduct experiments that every other species would consider insanely dangerous, Elena replied without hesitation. I need to get close enough to study how it actually works, and then I need to test my theory about reprogramming its original terraforming protocols. Commander Park looked uncomfortable. Admiral, sending our people directly into a plague zone goes against every safety protocol we've established. James, we've never let safety protocols stop us from doing what needs to be done, Rebecca said. That's exactly why the Veilter knew we would be different. Other species see an unstoppable threat and run. We see an unstoppable threat and figure out how to make it work for us. 3 weeks later, the UE's innovation approached the Kepler 186 system, which had been completely consumed by the void plague 6 months earlier. What they found was both horrifying and fascinating. The plague had indeed consumed all organic matter on the planets, but it had left behind something unexpected: perfectly prepared soil matrices with ideal chemical compositions for supporting life. It's exactly what I predicted, Elena said, studying the scanner readings. The terraforming protocols are still intact. They're just not activating. The system is stuck waiting for a signal that tells it to begin the reconstruction phase. Elena's team worked in specially designed containment suits, collecting samples and running experiments directly in the plague-affected areas. They're human. Stress responses actually seemed to calm the plague's aggressive expansion, creating small pockets of stability that allowed for detailed study. Admiral. We found the activation sequence, Elena reported after 2 weeks of intensive research. The void plague is waiting for specific biological markers that indicate a species is ready to terraform and colonize. But it's looking for markers that most species only produce under extreme stress combined with creative problem-solving. The kind of biological state that humans naturally enter when facing impossible challenges, Rebecca said, beginning to understand the implications. Exactly. And here's the beautiful part. Once we trigger the reconstruction phase, we can guide it. The terraforming protocols are incredibly advanced, capable of creating ideal conditions for multiple species simultaneously. We're not just stopping the plague, we're turning it into the most powerful terraforming tool the galaxy has ever seen. The first test was conducted on a small asteroid that had been consumed by the plague. Elena's team introduced the human biological markers that activated the reconstruction protocols, then guided the terraforming process to create a miniature ecosystem that could support both human and alien life forms. The results exceeded every expectation. Within 72 hours, the dead asteroid had been transformed into a thriving mini-world with breathable atmosphere, flowing water, and the basic biological foundations needed to support complex life. The plague hadn't been stopped. It had been converted into humanity's greatest tool for galactic expansion. Admiral, Commander Park said, staring at the scanner readings in amazement. If we can replicate this process on a larger scale, we could terraform entire systems in a matter of months instead of centuries. Rebecca smiled, thinking of Captain Sarah Chun and the ancient Veilter warnings. The Veilter were right about everything. They predicted that humanity would face an extinction-level threat and somehow turn it into an advantage. They knew we were unstoppable because we don't just survive challenges, we transform them into opportunities. The news of humanity's success spread through the galaxy within days. Species that had been fleeing the plague began to return to their territories, but now they were asking for human assistance in terraforming new worlds. The same technology that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization was now being used to create paradise worlds, capable of supporting multiple species simultaneously. Kethmar contacted Rebecca again, this time with an offer that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. The Galactic Collective wishes to propose a new arrangement. We offer humanity leadership status in galactic affairs and unlimited expansion rights in exchange for your terraforming expertise and your unique ability to solve impossible problems. Rebecca considered the offer carefully. Kethmar, we appreciate the recognition, but humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We want to explore it, improve it, and help every species reach their full potential. We'll share our terraforming techniques freely with any species that wants to learn. Even after we tried to limit your expansion? Even after we doubted your capabilities? Kethmar asked. Especially then, Rebecca replied. That's what makes us human. We don't hold grudges against people who challenge us. We prove ourselves by exceeding their expectations. 5 years later, Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest space station, watching as ships from dozens of species worked together to terraform a previously uninhabitable system. The Void Plague had been completely converted into a tool for creation rather than destruction, and humanity's unique approach to problem-solving had become the foundation for a new era of galactic cooperation. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined her at the viewport, now serving as the head of the Galactic Terraforming Initiative. Rebecca, we just received confirmation that the last plague site has been successfully converted. 17 star systems that were considered lost forever are now home to thriving colonies representing 23 different species. Rebecca nodded, watching as human and alien crews worked side by side to guide the terraforming process. The Veilter archives were right about everything. We were unstoppable, but not because we conquered or destroyed. We were unstoppable because we refused to accept that any problem was unsolvable. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their fundamental belief that every challenge could be transformed into an opportunity, every threat could be turned into an advantage, and every impossible situation could be solved with enough determination and creativity. The Veiltar had tried to warn the galaxy about humanity's rise, but their warning had become a promise. Humanity had indeed become an unstoppable force, spreading through the stars not as conquerors, but as problem solvers, turning every obstacle into a stepping stone for galactic advancement. As Rebecca watched the terraform process create new worlds, capable of supporting life from dozens of different species, she realized that the ancient predictions had been fulfilled in ways that even the Veiltar might not have anticipated. Humanity wasn't just unstoppable, they were the force that made everyone else stronger too.